hello, Smiley. I guess Ken's not coming back right away. So,
I can come back. It's your show, man. Take it away.
Gotta love him. Well, listen. Why don't you introduce yourself and kind of let the audience know how you are here, how you got here, and what your journey has been.
All right, I'm Smiley's _garden on Instagram. We also do Smiley's Angels seeds as a seed bank. So smileysangels.net is where you can find out more about those. I guess I started growing. Yeah, it's 9 years ago now, and made a venture of that being my full-time employment for 3 years, and then that kind of fell through as of recently, and then so I've been shifting gears a little bit back into just growing my own head stash and living life, man. So it's been an interesting journey. I guess for a while there, I did the Organic Takeover, which was another podcast on YouTube on Eagle Gardens channel, and I got the pleasure to meet you there and seen you in person a few times and meet you, Leighton. So got to become good friends with you over the years here too. So it's always a pleasure to talk with you, man.
Agreed, my friend. Agreed. I'll never forget that first podcast that you interviewed me on, and I was like, damn, this guy's got more fucking good questions than anybody I've ever met. And I think I keep saying that repeatedly live. So if anybody ever wants to watch it, it's out there on Eagle. What is it? Fucking
Eagle. Yeah, Eagle Gardens is the YouTube channel, and then I think he has like a separate playlist for the organic takeovers. So I was only doing those every so often, and then Eagle was doing a show every night, so there's quite a few in his playlist. But yeah, we go back a few years now.
Dude, that was during the pandemic, man. That was crazy times.
Yeah, and I was looking at that too. There really hasn't been a whole lot of people talking about like redox and EH as of recently. I mean, some info came out about it, and then it was kind of one of those things that I think people decided that it wasn't easy to check or test themselves, so it kind of got pushed by the wayside. But yeah, I think that's still a pretty interesting topic, and really, as far as like trying to understand and get your head around it, kind of opens up some understanding of different things that happen in the soil too. So that was a pretty interesting topic.
Yeah, agreed 100%. And it's funny how these trends move in and out, but that was one of the trends that shouldn't. And again, you're right. The hardest part is how do you measure EH? The instruments themselves are so damn sensitive that unless you're in a completely controlled environment with no outside influence from magnetic waves, which where do you find that these days? You really can't get a solid, hard reading that you can live by. So, until AI is introduced to this concept and along with decent monitoring equipment, there's no way we're going to really be able to manage, I should say, is the right word, what's really happening as far as protons moving around in the soil solution. But I can say that if you really look at the graphs that he created, the units of measurement on pest pressure and anaerobic versus aerobic zones, then you'll know where you are as far as if you have these pests, you're outside of that center sweet spot. So, I mean, I still think that the charts themselves have great value for understanding, maybe not verifying exactly, but definitely understanding what's going on in your soil system.
Yeah, that's so that was Olivier Houssin. For anybody listening, you can Google his name. He does a ton of deep dives. He's kind of the guy at the forefront of like studying this, right? Like and basically, yeah, I thought it was really interesting how he had the graphs, and he actually could tell what type of problems you would be having based on that measurement in the soil, and it was developed and studied, and then these graphs came out based on the data that they were getting from their studies, and it was pretty eye-opening to think that we actually are doing things as the gardener to cause the problems down the line. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, you know, that's why that information just skyrocketed to the surface 3 years ago, is because of that. Like enough highly educated or highly experienced gardeners started to say, wait, what? That's why? And so again, it provided a tremendous amount of value. The understanding, the educational component behind it is very deep and very difficult to completely wrap your head around. And that, I think that's the Achilles heel to it, more or less. But I swear those charts, if people get their hands on it, will help a lot.
Yeah, and it's one of them things too that, like, it seems like no matter how experienced of a gardener you are, it always just comes back to watering, like in your practice of watering and like understanding it better. And I always kind of find myself coming back around to that. And like to this day, I don't feel like I know how to water properly. Like I don't know. It's one of them weird things, but it's kind of like you can go from one being too wet to too dry so quickly and so easily in a system. And it's been pretty eye-opening for me to start really trying to zero in on some of that.
You know, that's why I loved Alex. I've been trying to get him on the show. Unfortunately, he moved to Spain, so there's a huge time difference. And you know, the work that he had done in crop steering using water was incredibly enlightening, to say the least. And the equipment that he was trying to create was, you know, basically 3D printed products that you can pull apart and fix together in a field without if any, tools. But unfortunately, I've been chasing him, and eventually I'll catch him and get him back on the show. I just want to catch up with where he is, because he's another one that I met probably 3 years ago, just before the pandemic. I met him virtually, not over personally, but we talked extensively for over a year and a half, maybe 2 years, about what he was doing. And he actually reached out to me because of the horizontal system. He said that was the key to better comprehending these units of measurement, because he too had struggles with the individual instruments. So, you know, he's measuring millibars to very small fractals or large numbers, which is the opposite of what you would think. It's not intuitive, but and he couldn't get these, you know, instruments to measure correctly. And so he said, hey, well, if I put this layer in, will it work? And I'm like, absolutely. That will tell you the overall moisture value of the soil. And as a matter of fact, Tom, another guy we had on, I think it was a couple weeks ago, he's been on twice now. He and I talked about using the aerometer in his horizontal soil beds so that he could better understand his issues with watering and dry back. And so, you know, this is a common issue. I mean, it's always been since I first got introduced into the cannabis industry, or cannabis community, I should say, which is why I put that system together, because, you know, the pots would go anaerobic on the bottom and hydrophobic on the top and sides. And you pour water on it, just roll right off. So, you know, I knew there had to be a better way to do it. And it's just a matter of explaining it to people like, hey, this is a little outside of your traditional cannabis cultivation block, but it's still going to give you an advantage to traditional watering, which is a nightmare. Like you said, it's so hard because it can flip so easy. And that's kind of where the horizontal takes the, you know, buffers the system and helps prevent those tremendous moisture swings. You know, and speaking of which, right, listen to this. I've been making compost out here for about 3/4 of a year. And we just went through an incredibly dry period, hot, dry out here in California. And so as of Saturday midday, it started raining. And it just finished raining this morning, probably around 8 or 9. So I went up to the compost pile, and this was not downpours. This was nice, steady rain. Went up to the compost piles. Smiley, it had only penetrated about 3/4 to an inch. That's it, after that long a period of time. So it shows you when these materials go hydrophobic, it's really complicated to get them to go back to hydrophilic. And I was using core, which is a wonderful one for that. It definitely holds water longer than a lot of traditional composts do. The other product I was using was kiln dried lumber fines. And once those kiln dried lumber, when you hydrate those, man, they're like little water pellets.
Huh.
And I use some pit moss. And again, pit moss is wonderful at holding water. But once you lose it, man, trying to get it back in there is a nightmare.
Yeah, that's crazy. Even with that long of a period of, a constant saturation of some type, you'd think it would have crept in. But yeah, like what you're talking to, that always blows my mind. Like running a sprinkler even on my garden, and then just trying to. There was a little area I was just messing with where I would, run the sprinkler for 20 minutes, give it 20 minutes, and then dig in, see what happened, and kind of feel where it was or what was going on. And it will blow your mind. Like the water channels through there. It doesn't always like soak in like you picture in your head. And yeah, it's still one of the tougher parts.
So gearing up to play with this plant called Protease, some people pronounce it. It's a 300 million year old plant. It's it is the oldest plant, I believe, on the planet. And it has some pretty quirky requirements. And so the client has been using a traditional potting soil mix and then adding a little bit of sand to get help with the drainage. And they had the same problem. Like it was either too dry or it was too wet. It got all kinds of fungus outbreaks. And so here again, it's the same damn thing. So I finally got their soil reports today, and I started looking at them. It's going to take me a minute on those because there's like eight test pits, and the variety of texture is pretty significant from clay to sand. But I'm thinking too that sand component, even in compost, helps to get the water in instead of just sitting on the surface. But that's something I'm going to have to play with. And the only problem with adding sand to compost is you throw off the bulk density. It's a problem because now it's so much heavier than it would have been without it.
Yeah, I was going to say the weight goes up, but what effect is that going to have on the process of the compost?
Great question, right? So I'm using in my composting practice, I'm not using fresh ingredients, at least at Peach Hill Soils. Here at the house I do. But for the most part, I'm using pre-processed waste streams. So they come in, there's an organic, what do they call those? Vertical farms in LA doing microgreens. That's all core. So I'm getting that's where I'm getting my core source from. The kiln dried fines, that's pretty obvious construction debris. No plywood, it's just dimensional lumber. Then it's spent mushroom substrates, another nice one. That again, once it goes hydrophobic, it takes a lot of time to get it to come back to hydrophilic. And so in all of these processes, you're starting with these materials that would be really beneficial for. Again, my goal is biological compost over nutrient dense compost first. And, it's taken me a minute to get through that, figuring out this California weather and UV levels that are so much higher than I'm used to back east. And, I think that too comes into play with the type of lighting that cannabis growers are using, as, also contributing to the fact that you do get that dryback, both based on the circulation. You guys all have fans blowing all the time. So there's a constant air movement. And then if you are using, some of the HPSs, I don't think, does anyone use metal halides anymore, Smiley?
Yeah.
Okay. So, those are throwing some UV, not like a true LED UV focused light, but there's still some out there. So, that's going back to trying to figure out how best to rehydrate compost or any soil potting mix for that matter after it's gone hydrophobic. It goes back to the only thing I could figure out was cover crops, keep protecting that soil or that compost from getting exposed to those, that direct wind or high intensity light. Have you been mulching or have you been cover cropping?
I've migrated into cover cropping for a while, and now I've kind of migrated back into the mulching side.
Okay.
And so Wormies GR Chandler, they do the vermi mulch, they call it. But essentially what it is it's just a larger screening. When they do the worm castings or the vermicompost, they screen it at 1/8 of an inch. And for the vermi mulch, they screen at 1/4 inch. And what it does is it puts a lot of they're about the eraser size maybe type wood chips in there.
Yep.
And they're all kind of like coated in the vermicompost and all. You know what I mean? They're kind of almost like covered in all that stuff. But that has seemed to really help work the best for me, because I've noticed that can absorb the moisture when I'm putting it down, and it can also help exchange it to that top layer of soil. You know what I'm saying? And it seems to really keep all the worms and all the life stay up at the bottom of that mulch layer really well. So like
how thick is the mulch? How thick?
An inch of that on. So,
okay. And does it break down pretty quick, or does it last for the grow for one?
No, it breaks down. Yeah, because it's already, it's like already been in there the whole composting process. It's like already a year in it,
So pretty punky.
Yeah. So.
Which is good and bad. Punky holds water, but it doesn't last because there's no lignin left or cellulose.
Yeah, but it works really great for a mulch layer, and also because of the screening size, you get all the sacks, the worm eggs. Yeah, you get all the worm eggs, and then you get like some little worms in it and all that too. So it's almost like you're inoculating the soil with all the worms. And
that was another thought that I had too, was to actually introduce some worms into the compost on a commercial scale. But I know it's going to happen. Like after I spent a couple of minutes thinking about it, and then I went down to at Peach Hill, they have a vermicompost area. And I went down to that area after I thought, oh, wait, that would be a great way to get, channels, tubes and ways for gas exchange as well as water infiltration. But what I noticed is when I dug into their worm bins, that the worms were down. They were not in the top 6 inches because it was just too dry for them. So back to square one again, at least as far as I'm concerned. And it's not like I can afford to bring out, huge amounts of wormies mulch. But, and listen to this, I actually took hay bales, and you know what a flake of hay is, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't break them apart. I left them in flake and covered the top of a compost pile, brought down drip tubing, drip irrigation, set it just underneath the, I laid those down like a cover crop. And then I laid the tubing on top and then threw some loose hay on top. So it was kind of forcing the water to go through those flakes before it hit the surface of the compost itself. And I was like, oh, this is going to work like a charm. Nope. Nope, didn't work. So it's like, I'm going to have to come up with another way to use some kind of perhaps soaked chips or something like that as a top layer. But the only problem with that is then I got to screen it again. And every time I screen that shit, I lose a certain percentage of the biology that I'm trying to grow out. So it's a real catch-22 out here for sure. And it's the same thing that you got to deal with in your grow, is how do you protect the organisms that you're wanting to work in that rhizosphere, which is very close to the surface. I mean, yeah, you got roots going down, but the actual root ball itself, there's probably 25% of it in the top few inches.
Yeah, if you can keep it moist, you'd be surprised how active the roots are through that top layer.
Mm-hmm.
Because like even running the earth boxes, if you put the shower cap, you've seen the earth box, right? They're sub-irrigated, but they have a shower cap covering to put over the top to protect from moisture loss. and the roots. So the top layer will be kind of wet in those, and the roots will come right up out of them almost.
Yeah, almost start air pruning themselves.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, you know, there are some tarps. They're like felt that you can use on commercial scale composting. I wonder if one of those or a piece of that might do the same thing as Wormy's mulch. Like if you put, you'd have to cut a slit to get it to wrap around a cannabis plant, but that too might be beneficial to holding that moisture in until the next time you have to add more Wormy's mulch on top. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, just trying to cover the top of the soil.
Yeah, and it's a felt, so it's breathable. It's kind of like Typar. So Typar, the concept was that vapors trapped inside the wall could move out, but new moisture couldn't move through. So this concept is the reverse of that. It traps the moisture underneath the tarp, but lets water infiltrate through the top.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. I'm actually I'm supposed to get my hands on a roll of it next week, beginning of next week. So if I do, I'm going to cut you a chunk of it and ship it to you and have you play with it, right? Because it might be really beneficial. And especially, are you in pots or beds? I think you're in pots, right?
Yeah, well, now I'm in all earth boxes now. So
you went full earth?
Mm-hmm.
How are you liking it?
I like it. It's a little different, but I like it. I took away from I don't run the shower caps on them. I run that mulch, and I don't bottom water. I don't water through the tube. I water through the top. So I do things a little different with them, but they function well and they do a good job for it.
So Ken, maybe you can pull up these earth boxes. It's kind of like a sip. So it's like a sub-irrigation type system. But if you water from the top, it goes down, it gets trapped in the bottom, and then comes back up as it needs it. But if Ken can find one of those, we can hopefully get a cross section so the audience can really understand what you're talking about. That was a technique. I think Alan Atkins came up with that, right?
Yeah, and I've been playing with it for a number of years now, and from Alan, I listened to his way of doing it and started out, but Build a Soil promotes them a lot too, and they got some in their like grow series. So if you follow them, they Jeremy's doing a grow series with these right now.
Is he?
Yeah, but you can run them any different ways. So I've just kind of migrated away from the shower cap and away from bottom watering and certain things for different reasons. But like, it's just I don't know. It's just the way it goes. Like, I don't know. I always seem to change a little bit here and there, thinking it's.
If you're not playing, you're not learning. You ain't getting anywhere, right?
Yeah.
There's always a different way to skin a cat, although they'd never like it.
like in the bottom of those, there's so it's the pot itself, and then 2 inches up or 2.5 inches, whatever. There's a tray that holds the soil media. And then in the corners is where it contacts the reservoir to wick it up into the pot itself, is how it's supposed to function. And then the shower cap on the top keeps moisture from escaping. It'll condense on that plastic and rain back down, kind of. So that preserves the watering to it. But the first issue I really ran into was that the media would fall through that grating.
Okay.
Get into the reservoir on its own outside of the wicking points. So I had to get landscaping fabric to like keep the media from falling into the reservoir, because I didn't notice it as much on the first run, but like if you tried to rerun the same pot with another plant, it would definitely show its face. And then it would get anoxic down in the bottom to where it wouldn't have. So you would have organic matter sitting in the reservoir, not like the wicking material, but actually like a whole pile of it in there. And that would cause it to go anoxic, and also the plant would just one day just go yellow on you, and you'd be like, what the fuck? Like, what did I do? Like, what happened? But it was, so I had that a few different times with them where they would be, you know, I guess we'll say the controversial microbial collapse in the system, and like, you know, call it whatever you want. It happens, and biology does die. So yeah, that's always a fun topic. But.
Did the reservoir get stinky because it was anaerobic?
Yeah, oh yeah, you could smell it at the bottom. You had to kind of dig down, but when I was changing it out, I was actually exchanging the media, emptying it, washing it, all that, and you could really see it in the reservoir and all. So
yeah, that was always my fear with any type of sip, because if you do get organic matter, fines are really small. It's like almost silt, a little bit bigger. It gets down in there, and yeah, it's gonna go anaerobic just over a matter of time. And then once it goes anaerobic, well, how do you get it aerobic? Right? You can't. You got to break it down and start over, unless you add in aeration throughout the process. But then what have you done? You waste electricity on a system that you didn't really need to. So it's one of those delicate tap dances whenever you get into those type of sub irrigation systems.
Yeah, that really mattered too. That was a thing. Like I noticed I wouldn't want the if I was feeding down the water tube, like I would want that plant to be able to soak that up in a couple of days. And I know, like, if you kept looking down there and it was like 5-6 days and you still had water down in there, and it was the same that you added, 5 days ago or 6 days ago, that always ended up to be a pretty bad situation too. So like, yeah. That's why I've kind of migrated to top watering. Is just I can.
And that's the best
amount of water that I can get, maybe a little heavier, and it'll fall into the reservoir if need be, and then get pulled up as they can use it. But it allows me to control it a little better than just pumping it down the tube and waiting until it's dry again.
Hoping for the best. Ken, what did you want to add?
I was just saying this is the best cross section I can get, where you can see the water on the bottom and the pipe to fill it, and the roots, etc.
Thank you. That's perfect. That was exactly what I was hoping you could find. Yeah,
it's kind of like your horizontal system. I mean, it has the bottom reservoir. They're separating it with a grating instead of the sand layer. So.
And the only problem is, though, that, like you said, you had to add the filter fabric to prevent those fines, which are going to migrate in the soil every time you water, from getting down into that sip. And so again, if you just get rid of or leave the tray and whatever you want to do, fill the bottom with sand. This is another experiment I've told I don't know how many people to try, because it's really interesting to see. But if you take a compound bucket or a 5-gallon bucket, you fill it 3/4 full of sand, coarse sand, or whatever sand you can get your hands on. Fill it with water till it hits the surface, and push your handprint in and pour off the water till your handprint is dry. So you don't have a tremendous amount of excess water. Take that bucket, put it on a tarp, flip it upside down, and let it sit. Watch how long it takes the center of that core, the center of that cylinder, to dry out. That sand just holds that moisture like nobody's business. So you don't have to worry about as fast of evaporation in that situation for 2 reasons. Number one, it's not exposed, and number two, it's preventing any fines from getting down in there and going anaerobic. So I don't know. It works. It's definitely an effort to set these up. That's no joke, especially if you're going to wildcraft this stuff yourself. It does take a tremendous amount of effort. But once you build it, it's done. All you have to do is add a little soil to the top as the organic matter, your horizon, slowly gets broken down. So pretty brainless system. And it does help with that whole preventing the hydrophobic surface, because as the top dries out, it creates that tension to pull the water up.
I've noticed, so I did mix sand in with some of my soil mixes. So over the years, I've done several different ones, but I started adding a percentage of sand to it. And I noticed that it'll never get in that super hydrophobic where it's almost like a hockey puck kind of thing. It'll always kind of absorb moisture with that sand in there. So it does help, but it adds a ton of weight, like you say. So now 3 times how much they should weigh to move the pots around.
But for whatever reason, it's kind of like counterintuitive to think that sand would help with a hydrophobic and hydrophilic issue.
Well, it's really interesting, the like nuanceness of like what's actually in a soil mix, and especially when you're talking that sand, silt, clay, organic matter type definition, where the percentages of, say, the sand or clay really can make a dramatic difference of what is actually able to grow there.
Agreed, 100%. People don't understand that the clay actually expands and holds a lot of water. So in the right environment, if you're both, again, biologically complete, for lack of better words, it really helps those clay platelets stack and stand, not just stack. So then it prevents that situation where the moisture from the bottom clay plate has to travel all the way through the plate above it, through the plate above it, through the plate above it to get to the surface to actually prevent that from happening. And of course, the opposite is true as well. When it rains, if those clay platelets are stacked, it's going to erode. It's going to wash out horizontally instead of vertically, like the way it's supposed to. So I love clay. I'm a big fan of clay. But out here, you start saying, "Oh, I love clay," and they get pissed at you because they're like, "I've been fighting this shit for years," and I'm like, "Yeah, because you don't have any fucking organic matter in it, dude, or you don't have sand, or you don't have any biology to kind of support the columns." But that's a whole nother freaking ball of wax right there.
So Leighton, if I was making a soil mix, a new batch of soil, say, so the basic third, like, and I wanted to add a clay component, what would you suggest would be a good way to go about that?
That's a great question. So anytime you're working with clay, especially in the elemental form, so like harvested from the soil, like not going to buy potting clay potting clay. A couple things. You want to avoid white clay because that's primary. It has very, very little nutritional value. Yes, it has got good CEC, so it will hold nutrients, but it also doesn't provide nutrients. So I always like the reds, the blues, the gray clays, anything that got color to it. Then what you need to do is screen it as fine as you possibly can, because obviously it's going to come in a clump. Once it's been screened and fluffed up, you got to let it dry almost to the point where it's dust. Like you can take it and throw it in the air and you see a cloud. That's how to homogeneously blend it with organic matter. If you can accomplish that, you just tripled your CEC beyond. When you take the organic matter and you mix it with that dust, the dust will cake to the crevices and cracks and crannies of the organic matter as well as coat them. So what did you do? Well, what you actually did was you took that organic matter and made it so that now it's more of a water bank. In other words, as the organic matter wants to dry out and release the water, it has to release it through the clay. And the clay will hold it a lot longer than the organic matter will. So you've increased your CEC through the roof. You've prevented that fast dryback of organic matter. You've provided a significant amount of more nutrition to your pots. I don't know as it's going to help with drainage the way sand does, because it does hold that moisture so well. So I would say if you did a third, I would not put the clay on the aeration. I would put the air on the compost or what is your other third? Do you use core or use peat?
It was third peat, third compost, and third aeration.
Yeah, so I would treat the peat and I would treat the compost with that powderized clay, but not the aeration. And I think you'd have a really interesting grow. I think you'd be pushing genetic potential with all of that nutrient storage. Because as the organic matter breaks down based on the biological breakdown process, those nutrients are going to get stuck on the clay platelets. The organic minerals will stick on those, or I should say, be careful, cations, right? Not your anions. Will stick to that. Although you do get one anion on the top and one anion on the bottom, but you get 100 parking spots around the outside edge for all of those other nutrients, calcium, magnesium, potassium. So I think it would be a really good experiment to do. I would highly encourage you to do it. Let's see what happens.
Well, the one I did, I don't know if you've heard of this place. It's actually an online resource, but Rock Dust Local. They got rock dust studies from a bunch of different areas. It's a pretty unique place where you can get some. But they had basalt rock dust that was like microfine, like powder.
Yep, micronized
or whatever. So that was what I was kind of counting on as the clay component of the mix, I guess. So.
Yeah, so this is one we started a conversation with Av about, like silt. People think silt is mineral. It really isn't. It's organic matter. And the last interview we did before, or actually two podcasts ago, finally I had another person come on and agree the fact that he truly believes that silt is organic matter as well. But what is the difference between rock dust and clay? Well, rock dust, I have never played with a micronized type, but my gut feeling is it won't twist into a snake in your fingers, right? That's one of the ways you test clay, is if you can roll it with your fingers into a snake, that's pure clay, or not so contaminated clay. Contaminated clay will kind of ball up, but it'll fall apart. Silt won't ball up. Organic matter won't ball up. So, well, they'll ball up, but I should say that they won't transfer into a rollable thing that sticks together. And again, it depends on the moisture. So rock dust has got that same thing. It's not going to roll into a snake, right? I mean, have you tried to do that experiment with the...
No, I haven't. That's like total light bulb moment for me. I'm like, oh no shit, that's freaking genius.
Hey, I didn't come up with it. I just play in the soil science world. So those are the tests you do in the field to figure out what you have. And so silt is very creamy. It's like a moisturizer. It's very slippery. Sand obviously isn't. And clay rolls. And so that's kind of one of those things, like if you don't have a jar with you and you're in the field and you're trying to identify, these particular individual components, those are some tricks you can use for sure in the field. So the one thing that I love about micronized stone dust is that it too will stick to that organic matter, similar to the clay. I don't know if it's going to have the CEC value that the clay platelets are. So traditionally, like basalt is paramagnetic, right? So we know it has a low charge, but is it negative or positive? And I don't think it's going to be both, like a clay platelet. I think it's going to probably be one or the other.
Well, my understanding paramagnetic means that it has the ability to accept both.
Oh, is that what it is?
That's what my understanding of the paramagnetism was.
Okay, because my understanding, this is one of those subjects too. You're going to have 50% of the people saying you're wrong, and the other 50% agree with you. So it's one of those, it's tricky, man. Because again, it depends on what type of rock dust you're using. If you're using a dolomite or an expanded shale, or a metamorphic rock versus a sedimentary rock, you're going to have all kinds of different results. But the basalts, which are, our continents float on basalt, so that shows you how dense that stuff actually is. Definitely has some unique properties, unlike those other types of rock that I just discussed. And again, I was blessed that I did granite and marble and onyx contracting work for about 15 years. So I got to play with all these different stones. And being the geek that I am, I always wanted to know, all right, where in the world did it come from? How big is the mine? What are the properties geologically that this material has, so that I better understood how to cut it and polish it. And so I got to play with a lot of these rock dusts, because when we cut it, we create this stuff called slurry. And I would take the slurry and throw it outside and kind of like let it dry out, and then sprinkle it on my lawn, because I had a buddy at the time, Jeff Frank, who was teaching organic land care for residences. And he was always ranting and raving about rock dust. So I'm like, damn, I'm a rock dust factory. But I did notice some of these dusts. And again, I'm cutting this slab, all these different slabs. So I'm getting all these different blends of rock dust together. Some of them worked really well, and others did not. Others, really kind of made a mess out of the soil. So I think there's a lot more to understanding the geological properties of any one specific rock, but basalt by far stands out as what I would consider the most mineral rich rock of all of them.
Nice. That was one thing nice about the Rock Dust Local website, is they show all that information, so you can get all the test results and stuff from the rocks that they're offering too.
Nice. Hey Ken, can you pull up that website and let's take a look and see if what they say about the basalt dust, because this is something that's always...
What's the name of the website again?
Rock Dust Local.
Okay.
Thank you, Ken. Have you had a chance to use it?
Yeah, no, that I found the website from Build a Soil, actually, because they carry some of the rock dust from them, and then I just went to the source to get it. But yeah, trying to think now, 5 years ago when I was mixing soils, when I started using them.
Nice.
So I had it for one of them.
And were you always using the basalt, or were you using some of the other ones?
No, I always use the microfine basalt, and then they have like a 2-pack that was the microfine basalt and then the St. George's black. I think they're right there on the screen next to each other. But yeah, you get I think it was like 50 pounds of each or something like that.
Yeah, this is the one that Andy Lopez recommends, is this site as well.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's just got a wealth of information, whether you buy from them or not. You can look up stuff on there too. There was a spot where there was like a map too that showed where the rocks were from and all that.
Interesting. I'll have to go play around on that one later.
Yeah, pretty cool source.
Yeah, definitely. And now you're on the nutrition side too, which is the next step in my journey in making biocomplete compost at scale, was to start introducing some of these minerals. I'm blessed that I have a tremendous amount of gypsum up there. So I actually did a little experiment on a 15-yard pile where I blended what I thought would be appropriate. Actually, it was a 20-yard pile. I guessed that if I used a 5-gallon bucket full of screened gypsum on that 20-yard pile, I would get my saturated paste within range. And because you know how compost is usually potassium heavy and often calcium deficient and heavy magnesium. So I did it. I did the experiment, and lo and behold, it did get really, really close to that. What is it? 70, 20, 10, or 75, 18, 7, depending on what you believe is that sweet spot. Have you ever, obviously you've done saturated paste on your soils in the past. Did you notice that basalt dust affected it in any way?
I didn't have anything to compare it to, so I was doing the tests after the fact. You actually brought up a really good point, though, that something that I learned through mixing the soil is like like anything, you go online, you look up, you find this recipe, and it's got the third, and then it's got a handful of ingredients to mix in, whatever it is, top dressings to put the nutrients in, right? Well, the problem with any of those recipes is just what Leighton pointed out, is the wide variation that can be in the portion of the compost, which is in a third of your mix. So now you could be way off. Like you could be adding potassium from a recipe into a soil that already has way too much potassium from the third compost that was there, or vice versa. You know what I mean? Like you're not adding enough calcium when you need to have more in because there's not enough. So like if I was to mix a soil now, which I haven't had the reason to, but the new process I would do would be to do the mix and then have the test on the soil before adding any amendments, because then you can compensate for what variable was there with the compost. And that way you can, when you're adding your amendments, if there's something high or low in the compost that's skewing that for some reason, you can try to compensate when you go in to amend it with nutrient, versus trying to throw the amendments in, then get the test done and go, oh fuck, I got way too much, you know what I mean? Or you can't pull it out at that point. So having it done before you're amending it was like, I don't know, kind of seems stupid now, but that was like, oh yeah, duh, I should probably do that. Like,
well, you know, dude, remember the cannabis market was in the friggin' basement for generations. So, you know, people were doing what they thought would be best and was afraid to send in samples. I remember laughing at people saying, yeah, we used to call it tomatoes. And they knew as soon as we said we were growing tomatoes, they would laugh, but they would try to help us. Because, you know, bottom line is, you know, you can't be just waving the flag like, hey, I'm growing cannabis. What's the friggin' chemistry balance? So a lot of people just did what trial and error to see what worked best. And usually the kitchen sink approach was what they found was best, because, you know, hopefully they did get a decent amount of water and you get the humic acid runoff that kind of makes all the chemistry play nice, but way better to just add what you need and not add extra. Like I have had 2 clients, dude, this year that called me about soil tests, and they were like, my potassium levels are through the roof. And I'd look at their reports and I'd be like, damn, man, how are your plants doing? And they'd be like, they look great. And I'm like, that's not possible, man. You're at toxic levels of potassium. And the one thing that was constant with both of them was that they use a humic acid, a bioag, either full humic or T7, T8 on a weekly basis. And again, you know, that's always been the key to everything in making chemistry play nice is the use of humic acid. And this is a great rabbit hole for you, dude. Do you understand how many different individual molecules make up humic acid?
There's thousands.
Right? I've heard 800 and I've heard 1800. I think Bob was the one that said 1800 individual molecules. So the concept is that when you start to break down the humic acid, say you break off these 6 molecules, well, they're going to have a different action than the 2 molecules, or 2 of the 6 molecules, or 4 of the 6 molecules. So as it breaks down, it's doing different functions in the soil. I believe that is why it makes chemistry play nice, because you have what's called biogeochemical interactions or reactions, because there's both. So as chemistry gets out of balance, biology gets pissed off because it doesn't like the environment that it's being forced to live in. So it snaps off a few of this or a couple pieces of that of the humic acid or the humates, whatever form that they have it in. And that puts the chemistry at bay, at least, so that they can survive in that environment and prevent toxicity. Because at the end of the day, if the plant gets toxic and can't produce the exudates that the bacteria want, well, then the bacteria die off. So it's kind of like this, all right, I'll save you if you save me, right? You can't give me exudates because you're toxic, but I'm going to fix the chemistry piece so that you push through this process of detoxifying, and then you can start reproducing those exudates that you promised me yesterday. What do you think of that hypothesis?
No, I agree. I would agree. I would think that probably the biology got affected first, but I would, because I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things like the plant's functioning to produce the biology, and it's with the discovery of like the rhizophagy cycle, that just totally flips everything on its head. And when we were talking in minerals and the you were talking about clays and the CEC cation exchange. It got my brain thinking like, okay, so, but if we increase the amount of biological activity going on in that soil, and we increase the number of bacteria, the number of fungi, all that, that's also holding all that nutrient too, not just, and it wouldn't be perceived as like CEC, right? But there is that capability based on the amount of living biology in that soil, right? Like
It's called nutrient or nutrition in ionic state. So we don't have the instruments yet to truly measure ionic forms of any one of the periodic table nutrients or minerals, gases, whatever, right? So bottom line is that the way I was taught and everything that I've read since was that a bacteria will mine all of these different nutrients out of organic matter or sand, silt, and clay, and store it in their pantry. So their pantry is like an oregano. It's like an organ. And they keep it in that organ so that when pH changes, they can go into that oregano, pull out a buffer up or down, or say they need a stronger acid to mine into this little grain of sand. Well, okay, they go back and they find, some of these other components, minerals that they can put together to start to build these stronger organic acids, or to fuel their overall energy so that they can divide. I mean, so all of these different things happen out of that pantry, which is all in ionic form because it's just easy to put together. So there's Earth Fort. You've heard of them, right? They have that was Dr. Lane Ingham's first stab at trying to create a lab that could accurately measure the biology that was present. Actually, I should correct that. Potential biology that was present. So in their process, what they do is they'll take a sample as soon as they get it, freeze it. And the reason they do that is to create it, to put it into stasis. Then when they're actually ready to do the test, which could be days or maybe even a week or two later, they pull it out of the frozen state, they warm it up, and then they add foods. So they're providing, again, incubation, the right temperature and the right amount of foods, so that whatever is in there in the necromass, so the overall biological pieces that can still come back to life because they were successfully cysted in the first place, will come out. And so, my argument was always like, well, that's the potential. When in nature does it actually get to the perfect potential for all of these things to come out and to come into play? Good argument, right? But that was the first stab at it. How else would you do this? How else could you find out what was present when you have samples being sent in from all over the world? So it made sense. It was the only step that could have been taken, because otherwise you got to look at that sample as soon as you get your hands on it, which is not always convenient. Let's face it, shit comes in like crazy in the spring and in the fall, nothing in the winter, nothing in the summer. So you can't, it's very difficult to, when you're dealing with such, incredible volumes at certain windows in time, to do it any other way. Now, the new way she teaches it is that the sample needs to be looked at within 7 days, I believe is the guideline. And you don't add foods, and you definitely don't heat it up. And I think this new methodology is a lot closer to looking at it in a natural light, not an artificial light. You need light, but This one's a little bit more natural. I mean, ideally, again, as soon as that sample comes in, you look at it, but you can't always do that either. So needless to say, back to Earth Fort, one of the really cool test data points that she created was what's called potential nitrogen release per acre over a 90-day period. The way she calculated that was understanding the basics that when a protozoa eats a bacteria, it only wants the carbon. Very, very rarely will it take the nitrogen, because if it eats too much nitrogen, it's going to explode. So basically, it's pooping out that nitrogen, probably 99-point-something% of the time. Well, that's free nitrogen in a plant available form. So in understanding that, okay, because of the number of predators, that would be amoeba and flagellates. You don't generally look at ciliates as a positive. Based on that number of protozoa, we can guess that they're going to graze on 10,000, 100,000 bacteria a day. And that means they're going to release this tiny little fraction of nitrogen per protozoa. So now you just math it out, right? Oh, you got 100,000 per gram, unigram. That's a tremendous amount of release of nitrogen. And just recently with the Muncher crew, I sent off 4 sets of 3 replicates because I wanted to get a decent amount of average data that I could, say I could stand behind and say, I don't want to knock anybody, but even in today's testing methodologies, there's just not enough care put into quality control. There just isn't. But people are not spending the necessary time to recalibrate after every test or make sure everything is 100% sterilized before they reuse that vial or whatever, right? I get it. At the end of the day, you still got to keep the lights on, pay the bills. So 100% quality control is just not cost effective because you'll lose your clients. That being said, that's why it's really important to send in triplicates of the same sample so that you can take an average of that and have a decent number that you can stand behind in a court of law, literally. That's kind of the way I look at shit. So needless to say, they came back at pretty much consistently 2 to 250 pounds of nitrogen released per acre over a 90-day period. Well, that's a fuck ton of nitrogen, dude. Like if you had a nitrogen budget of say 500 pounds per acre and you got 300 pounds free, well, guess what? That's not only reducing the cost of your fertilization, but it's also further reducing the amount of pollutants, free moving nutrients flowing with the water down into the groundwater, out into the streams and rivers. You've reduced your footprint by what? 3/5? That's a significant number. And, this is the stuff I used to preach to golf courses and, farmers and everything. And it was just crickets, it was just fucking crickets when I talked to them. Like they just didn't get it or they didn't believe it. But bottom line is it's been demonstrated over and over and over again that this is in fact true. So that being said, there's a tremendous amount of nitrogen tied up in our soils that can potentially be necromass. So necromass is the overall biological footprint of what is in that little gram of soil or unigram of soil. So have you ever heard that word necromass before?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's another one of these terms that have been present in the ivory towers of colleges and universities for quite some time. But it hasn't been until just recently in the last 5, maybe 4 years that average people are talking about this. And a prime example of this, listen to this one. You'll love this as well. So I got hired by this company called the Irvine Company to come down. They want to save water. This was the beginning of this year, but we started working together at the end of last year before the rains came. Go figure, right? Before the rains came. So they hire me. I come down to the parking lot. It's not a strip mall. It's a true outdoor mall with 4 sides, couple ways in, but stores all the way around it and a giant center parking lot. And they had basically, when they constructed it, they built a parking lot, and then wherever they wanted a tree pit, they would either leave the asphalt out or just cut it out after, and then just dig out what we call the base material, which is gravel and rock dust and nothing that a plant would really like to grow in. You know, they dig it out a foot if we were lucky, and then throw in some soil and plant these olive trees. Well, these olive trees, no joke, are about 15 grand a piece to replace. So, you know, it's very important that we don't fuck them up when we're trying to save water in soil environments. So the way I approached it was, I said, hey, this is how, you know, based on my understanding of the olive tree, has a very slow metabolism. It doesn't like a tremendous amount of excess moisture. It's not a tree that has to have dry feet or wet feet. It's pretty fluid, but again, you can't fill a pit with water and drown the tree. So let's go about it this way. I'm going to build you a compost that has incredible water storage capacity, but you have to shut the irrigation back 50% out of the gate. They laughed at me. The whole fucking team, dude. 8 to 10 project managers, fucking assistants. They're all like, you can't do that. You can't. You're going to kill the trees. You can't do that. I go, look, if you don't do that, you will kill the trees. And I'll make you sign a waiver if you don't promise me that out of the gate, you'll shut it back 50% and pay attention, right? And so, you know, they kept saying, well, if this works and if that works. And I'm like, no, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. As soon as we are done installing this, it's going to work. Again, laughter, right? I'm used to this by this time in my life. So I got the guys, I taught them how to dig out the chips that were present and put those to the side. And I said, now I want you to dig out all of this excess compacted fucking clay that you have, you know, around the roots. We're gonna dig down carefully until we find the lateral roots. Then we're gonna dig underneath them. Again, be very careful not to disturb them. We just want to get the soil off of them. Like, we pre-watered them, so it was relatively easy to peel the soil off of the roots themselves. Flap the roots up, put down a nice 4-inch layer of this biologically complete compost that had 33% pit moss added to it. Laid that down 4 inches deep, put the roots back down, kind of like helped push them in the soil or into the compost just a little bit. Then we laid down the drip tube and then put the chips back on top. They killed it at 50% out of the gate as promised. I went back 3 weeks later, did a qualitative soil analysis with a microscope and sent one off for quantitatives. I saw ciliates, she saw ciliates. I'm like, guys, we got to knock it back more. We got to knock it back to 70%. He ended up knocking it back to 65 because he didn't trust me. We've had no adverse plant reaction. And when we finally finished the test, I said, hey, you know, you kind of broke protocol because we were supposed to be doing biologicals at these windows. It's been 5 months now. I definitely think we need to do a follow-up biology to see how bad your reclaimed water or your water source is damaging the biology that's present in the soil. And I got to make sure you're not blooming ciliates. So he agreed, and they went out and they tested, and I said, hey, make sure you go down deep enough that you find the interface between the compost I provided you and the bed material, parent material that we put it on top. It's got to be right at that interface is where you want to test. So he harvested the material, sent it off to Andy down at Rhizosphere
Science.
Rhizoscience.com. And I got a phone call almost immediately, or text, and said, oh my God, Leighton, there's so many worms. I'm like, damn, nice. So where do those worms come from, Smiley? I mean, think about that. This is a compacted, commercial developed mall. And all of the soils that were brought in were obviously fill and rock and stuff that was compacted with friggin' compacting machines. And yet all of these worms found their way back. That's necromass. It's present. It's there. It's in the soil system. You can't totally fucking kill it. But the bottom line is you set it back to a point where it can't survive. It will not come out until it is the right conditions that allow it to come out. So yeah, he had big old night crawlers. He had little babies. He had castings in 5 months in a fucking tree pit in a parking lot. So that's what necromass is the ability for nature to recover no matter how bad we fuck it up. It just has to be given love at some point, and it will rejuvenate. It will restore itself back into a healthy, biologically complete environment with love and care.
That's an awesome story. I don't know, man. That is craziest thing about worms. They're there, man. And I don't know how to explain that, but they get into everywhere for sure.
So here's another one, right? Kyle Moots field. One application of fish group. That was it. Year later, he cover cropped, and problem was the cover crop wasn't tall enough for him to roll or crimp. And so he called me in a panic saying, I have to till. I have to till it. I can't leave the cover crop. It'll outcompete with my corn and beans. So I'm like, all right, till it, but just keep the till, just keep the blade only 1 inch down. Don't go any deeper than that. And if it pops out of the ground because the soil is uneven, don't worry about it. That blade, the disc will just chop and shred the little cover crop, so it won't affect it. I mean, it'll kill the cover crop enough so that your crop will be able to outcompete what left that didn't get killed. So he did this, and then he was out in his field walking around in circles, looking and going, called me in a panic. My soil's all stuck together. I'm like, yeah, you created fucking aggregates, dude. That's good fucking healthy soil. This is 500 acres of corn and beans that have been in production 60, 80 fucking years, right? All fertilizer, all pesticides. And he created aggregates within 1 year. And more importantly, it was loaded with fucking worms. Fucking loaded. Babies, big ones, everything. So his neighbor, who's a 68 or 78-year-old gentleman, has lived on that property his whole life as a neighbor, grew up on that property as a kid, sees Kyle out there scratching his head, looking around, and so he pulls his pickup truck over and comes out and says, Kyle, is everything all right, man? What's going on? What are you doing? And Kyle goes, look, my soil is all stuck together. So the old guy picks up a fucking clod and he sees worms and holes and he's like, oh my God, those are earthworms. And Kyle goes, yeah, I know, right? And the guy goes, I've lived here my whole life. I've never seen a single earthworm in the soil. All right? Proof is in the fucking pudding, dude. You provide the right environment, these guys will come back and they will work their fucking asses off for you to provide that soil that you need, that healthy soil that you need to grow healthy plants. Right? The power of biology. Ken, where are you? Ken. There it is.
It's all about the biology. I did a talk this weekend and specifically talking about this, and it's amazing what biology can bring back into life in our soils. It's amazing.
So quickly. Sorry, Poe keeps kicking the camera on me. You okay? All right. Say hi to Smiley. Remember Smiley?
Yeah, right. What's up, Poe?
Yeah. Oh God! Everywhere I went, everyone's like, Poe. They couldn't fucking bother with me.
Poe's the star of the show, Leighton. You're just here, filling
As a
in
mouthpiece.
space. Yeah.
So anyway, those are a couple of great examples of how necromass works. Is that you provide the right environment and it will come back wholeheartedly, especially if you do not use any more synthetics. And that's how fucking easy it is, dude.
So realistically, if you get all the biology functioning in a soil, does the nutrient testing even kind of matter? Is that something that you would continue to pull a sample, get it some testing to re-amend, or eventually?
So in a production system where you're pushing the plant, you're looking for the highest yields, then I would say yes, it is beneficial to test post-harvest, just so that if there is an imbalance, you have an opportunity to replace it. Will biology buffer it? Hell yeah, because it can still mine these nutrients out of the sand, silt, clay if you have sand, silt, clay. And if you don't and you're only organic matter, well, there's no nutrition in peat. I'm sorry. And there's very little nutrition in aeration, if any. So the only nutrition you have is the compost. Is the compost have nutrition? Hell yeah, it does. Is it hard for the biology to mine out of organic matter? No. That's why your organic matter drops, is because you pulled all the nutrients out of it and you created these tiny little fines, carbons, and silts that move down into the soil profile and create the anaerobic pocket at the bottom. So again, it goes back to, if you have all of these other things, then yes, biology can buffer it. But if you're trying to push this plant to give you the most yield or the highest terps or whatever you're looking to do, then no, you should retest and re-amend accordingly so that you are allowed to push the plant, right? Because otherwise the plant's not going to go to its fullest potential if you short it of nutrient. You know, this one I love to talk about, molybdenum. It's a trace mineral. Typically, it should be around 2 parts per million in a healthy soil system. It could be a little higher. I like to see it get a little bit lower. Nobody looks at molybdenum. Molybdenum is the key function to the plant's ability to metabolize nitrate. Do I need to repeat that? How many fucking soil tests I've seen that have less than, 0.002 of molybdenum, or 0.02, which means that you need 0.2, right? Not 0.002. Or you should have 2. It should be 2, not 0.2. So, here again, we're wasting all of those nitrate fertilizers because we're fertilizing a plant in a soil with no molybdenum. And it's this tiny little fucking thing like that that makes incredibly huge differences in yields. And so, once again, it's like, if you didn't do your soil testing and you ran that fucking run or that soil 5 times and you mined all the molybdenum out of there, well, now you're starting to go decline. Like, I don't know how many fucking cannabis growers have come up to me and been like, I used to grow great, I can't anymore. And it's like, well, do you understand soil needs to be looked at 3 parts: physical, sand, silt, clay, and organic matter, chemistry, and biology. If you have all 3 of those pieces in the sweet spots or close, then you don't have anything to worry about. The plant and nature will do the rest. But if you're missing one of those, or you're short on some component of those, well, now you've limited your ability to push the plant to its full potential. And that's one of those eye-opening conversations that a lot of people go, oh, damn, maybe that's why I used to grow so good, was because I was out in nature and I was in mineral-rich soil. I was in expanded shale. I had clay. I had silt. Oh, I was watering from the river. Oh, biologically rich water. Okay, now the pieces are fitting together. So you can't do that anymore. You can't steal the river water. Or you're growing in a tent and not outside. Well, now you still got to bring those pieces into the mix, because if you don't, you're limiting your potential. And then I'll get the call back 6 months later. Thank you so much. I'm a good grower again.
It is amazing though. Like, I've heard some people go real extreme, be like, compost fixes everything, but it is pretty amazing the shit that some good compost will just take care of. It's like,
well, it's the ultimate delivery system for biology, right? And it's all pre-digested nutrients. Like, the biology doesn't have to pull the fucking nutrients out of sand, silt, and clay. It's way easier to break down organic matter. The only problem is not all composts are created equally. And to be honest, the vast majority of shit out there is absolute junk.
Yeah.
You know, so always the issue. What goes shit in, shit out, good in, good out, right?
Well, that's
yeah.
one of the reasons that food that we eat that is broken down first, is much better for us and easier for our bodies to use. It's the same in the soil system.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit more about the market in Michigan. Like, I haven't been able to keep up. I had a couple group IGs that seem to have died out. Like, is the movement still going on? Are you having Compost Cup this year? How's friggin' Chandler doing?
Yeah, they're doing good. They do got Camp Compost going this year, and there's a Instagram
Leighton,
page.
watch this show, man. We just had him on a couple of days ago talking about Camp Compost. I mean, start watching our own channel, brother. Come on.
Ken, 36 hours in a day, and I'll have time to do that too.
Yeah, exactly.
Only fucking 24.
All right. You got to take care of Poe. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Poor guy's been getting neglected a lot lately. But anyway, so Chandler's doing well. The compost camp is coming back.
Yep. Yeah, they're getting that set up really nice now, and I haven't been able to make one yet, but hopefully maybe one of these I'll make. But.
There you go. And how is the cannabis market there?
Like I said, I kind of stepped back from it for at least the last 6 months, and so I've just been growing my own head stash. I don't deal with the market too much, but to my understanding, yeah, it's still pretty tough out there, and a lot of competition.
So just like everywhere else, a shit ton of competition moved in, and prices kind of crashed.
Yeah, and it's it's the same shit. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, the marketing rules is what it comes down to, like anything.
So Alexa and Hyphy, they're doing okay?
Yeah, I believe so. I only follow them in pictures on Instagram and stuff, but they got the garden still looking really nice. I just seen pictures they put up the other day.
Cool.
Yeah, they do a great job over there. That's pretty amazing setup they got too, having beds on two tiers. It add a lot of complexity to things. So.
Oh, dude, I don't know how they do it. I have a buddy back east in Rhode Island that does that 2-tier stuff, and it took him a good amount of time to get that dialed in, because those are two different environments, right? One is higher up, and obviously going to be warmer. One's down low, obviously going to be cooler. And he struggled, but he figured it out. I mean, shit he grows is just insane. So I'm glad.
Them too. They've been winning awards and doing a really good job. So.
The last time I was out there, last summer, Alexa gave me a couple of different cultivars to play with, and it was just a wonderful experience. It wasn't a stupid high THC. It was, well-rounded cannabis plant. It was like 18s to 20, but they had a lot of other cannabinoids and cannabinols and terps in them. So, really good experience, good quality high coming out of there. So they obviously are doing something right.
And I think the market still got to mature. I mean, if you think about it, like, I don't know, like even when you started smoking, like you didn't know what to expect. So you got your best expectation was your last experience,
right?
Basically, right? So like, or whatever you think is the best top shelf weed is just based off your own experience of whatever the best top shelf you've ever had, right? Like, that's what your basis of that is. So until somebody shows you something that's even better, like, it just kind of opens up your eye to it. And I think the market will kind of mature a little bit to where almost like people have tried some things and they've seen some things and they get to go, oh yeah, that's what they're talking about when they say this shit sucks, and they get to figure that out a little bit more, and it'll rise the cream to the top. But
yeah, agreed. I definitely think that the way the market's set up, where you walk into a dispensary and you get overwhelmed. Nobody's there to help you. They're just there to sell you. They don't even know what the fuck they're selling. Like, oh yeah, this is what everyone's buying. No. What's good for you? What smells do you like in nature? Do you have any ailments? Do you have any swelling or pain, or are you trying to get off opioids? What's going on with you? Why are you here? You want just something that's really light and gets you laughing like crazy, or you want something that knocks you out and helps you with pain management? And that's the problem, is there's that educational gap. And I think that I give hats off to Kevin Jodrey for creating, the Ganjier. He was actually the one that purchased that Ganjier.com and transitioned it over to Green Light Productions. I forget who the company is, the film company up in Ojai, and then formed that whole group so that now we can get some decent, educated people out into these dispensaries that can help people. I can't tell you how many times that Pauline would have clients that, she leaned heavily on me to help her navigate cannabis, because she couldn't smoke it. If she smoked it, she would literally be in convulsions on the floor. So she didn't have these experiences, the understanding of the different terpenes and what they do, and different levels of cannabinoids. And I'd hear horror story after horror story when she would educate these people to the best of her ability, and they wanted to go out and start exploring, where to purchase this stuff and what types of things to purchase, whether it's a salve or a smoke or a hash, whatever. And more often than not, these people will come back and be like, oh my God, it burned my throat. Or, oh my God, I was on the floor. I'm never going to touch that shit again. And it's like, so that whole piece is missing. And I think you're right. It's like, but if you give somebody a really bad experience, they're not going to go back, which is the sad part, because they need the medicine. And now they're afraid of it. And so a lot of people I had to talk off the ledge and say, no, you just got a really bad experience. Talk to me, tell me what you need, and I'll find some for you and I'll get it into your hands. And then once you did that, they were like, oh my God, thank you. Now I know what I'm looking for. And now I know how to express myself when I do go to a dispensary so that I don't get friggin' buy the wrong shit. That's the hard part. And unfortunately, because cannabis still has a tremendous amount of stigma behind it, because of all the damage those motherfucking pharmaceutical pirates did to this poor plant. It's like you said, it's going to take a lot of time for the market to mature. And it very well may not happen till all the boomers are dead, and the next generation who, like me, grew up in the 60s and was introduced to this cannabis, to the plant, and experienced, sure, there was times I got too stoned. There was times I smoked weed after I drank some beer and threw up. I had those experiences, but it wasn't so detrimental that I never wanted to touch the plant again. And then you start learning about the different cultivars like Thai stick and Colombian gold or Panama red. And then you're like, oh my God, the Panama's coming in, right? You get all excited. You get a freaking four finger lid and you be fucking happy for a month. But yeah, that's the hard part is both the education and giving people the tools that they need to, be able to ask the right questions and be their own best advocate. I think it's going to happen. I agree with you. And, there's other shifts too. Like there's so many of these big farms out here. Santa Barbara opened up the friggin' highway to hell and just let anybody come in, these billionaires, and just put up these monster fucking cannabis farms. And they crush the market. But guess what? It's going to crush them, So at the end of the day, once the market matures to a point where the green rush is over, and yeah, you'll have the Budweisers, you'll have the Heinekens, but you'll also have the Sam Adams, you'll have the Crafts. And I mean, look what happened to craft beer. Nobody thought it was going to make it. The big guys all laughed at it. Yeah. And now they're behind the eight ball. Now they're trying to buy up these, crafts cannabis or craft breweries and alcohol makers. So everything comes full circle. So it's just, I guess, a matter of time for the market to mature, as you said.
The best way is always going to be to figure it out for yourself and grow your own. And you'll have your own experience, and you can repeat it as often as you want once you figure out how to clone, and you won't have to worry about it. Mm-hmm. You won't even have to talk to nobody. You just grow your own.
Right. And I think that too is like, a lot of people think that this plant is hard to grow. Like that's the other stigma, is that cannabis growers, specifically salt growers, are always like, oh, it's really complicated, it's all pH, this, that. And it's like, no, just take a fucking seed, stick it in the dirt, water it, it'll fucking grow. Will it be the best? No, but will it work? Absolutely. And I think that's the fear of most people, that, oh, I can't grow this plant, it's too hard. No, it isn't. It's called weed for a fucking reason.
It's a weed. It's a weed.
No, I got a funny story. So like my lawn is in the backyard. It's pretty hard, compacted type clay, I guess. I don't know. But basically I was expanding the garden. So all I did was laid cardboard over the grass. And I added like 3-4 inches of used soil that from the pots that I had grown weed in, and I had a volunteer pop up, with the bunch. Right, it was on the edge though, and this is compacted soil, and this thing did not skip a beat, man. It grew a pretty good sized bush, and was just a beautiful plant the whole time. Never showed a sign of never showed a sign of deficiency whatsoever. And it literally was just growing up out of where my grass was going to grow. And I didn't do shit to it. I ended up cutting it down because it was a male, but it was like, I don't know. It just blows my mind. I always think of that because it's like, we put in an intention and all this stuff that we want to go perfect. And that fucking thing will grow out of the crack in the cement. You know what I mean? Like it'll just grow and be the biggest bush that you ever seen, just right out of the wherever.
Yep, there's so much truth to that, and I get it, because it does have an amazing ability to be pushed too, right? You can just don't take care of it. As long as it gets some water, it'll still grow. But you can also push this thing to really, do all kinds of wonderful things as far as medicinal properties. But yeah, that's the problem with most people, is they're afraid to try, because the stigma behind the plant. And the stigma created behind, growing it as well. That, it's got to be my secret way. This is my IP. That went on for too many years. And I love it nowadays, because I think everything is so much more open. There's so much more community behind it. There's so much more sharing of information. We've pushed out a lot of the bro science, and encourage people to educate themselves. Like, hey, if you like what I'm talking about, go research it, man. There's nobody stopping you other than yourself as to how to educate yourself to do what you want to do even better.
So what's the secret ingredient, man? There's always that marketing to, this is the secret ingredient, increase yields, increase flavor. What would your secret ingredient be?
Don't listen to it. If they're telling you they have a secret ingredient, they're trying to sell you something, and they know that you will never have something to compare it to, because chances of you doing a side-by-side with just that and doing it scientifically correct ain't going to happen, because everyone's like, oh, throw this at it, throw that at it, instead of like, no, you have to use just this product side by side with control to see if there is any difference. As soon as you say that, I'm too lazy, I'm just going to buy it anyway. Well, yeah, that's on you, man. That's on you. So if they say they have some secret ingredient and they're not sharing that, it's intellectual property, walk away. You want secrets to growing any kind of plant on this planet. Understand where that plant came from, what it likes. Look at soil as 3 components, and make sure that you are in those ranges and just make sure you keep it watered. Don't overwater it. Hey, drybacks are okay. Drybacks happen in nature all the time. Don't be afraid to let it dry back. And you can watch the plant. If you're paying attention, and 50% of anything in science is observation. So just look at the plant at the same time every day. And if you notice, hey, it's wilting a little, okay, add a little water. If you notice, deficiency, different coloration, look at the plant closely. Make sure it's not getting infested with a pest. So it's those are the things I would say are the true secret sauce to growing any type of plant. It's those simple few things.
So as far as the sales pitch, I know you are kind of sold on the idea of like grounding a pot, but what do you think of the new, there's a new kind of talk about the electroculture and actually guys building and putting antenna up into the air, down into the soil. Have you ever messed with that or read anything?
I have not personally messed with it, but I truly believe it works. Tesla. Anyone who's ever read anything on Nikola Tesla understands the ionosphere, understands, what do they call that? Quantum entanglements, like, basic energy transfer on a level that is very complex and we don't understand it. It's kind of like the multi-dimensions, right? People understand there are other dimensions out there. We've proven that. I mean, look at broccoli, look at arugula, right? Look at a regular like oak leaf or a maple leaf, and then look at one of those plants. You're getting to the point where you're starting to understand what a fourth dimension might look like. Fractals, right? Everything, life is fractals. So potentially there's endless dimensions, right? But you start getting into that, and people their eyes glaze over. So, and again, I understand it, like a lot of people aren't into critical thinking and really, diving down rabbit holes like you and I. And that's fine. You don't have to understand all that shit. You don't need to know how the clock works to be able to tell time. As long as you can tell time, you're fine. Will an antenna in the air and grounding it into the soil work? Abso-fucking-lutely. I'm a firm believer of it, just based on my limited knowledge of particle science, shared electrons, these things that again are pretty complex and deep. But if you're into that shit, read about it, watch some YouTube videos. There's so much information out there now that was never there before.
So like I was kind of thinking it on a level similar to like grounding the pots, but like how pH is the inverse measure of protons, and then EH is the inverse measure of electrons. So like the movement of those electrons through that soil or through that antenna, like, or at an ion level, it's not something that, but I was looking at that, like, I wonder what effect that would have on the actual like redox EH of the soil. You know what I mean? If that's the role that it's playing, is helping to facilitate the electrons needed for the reactions to happen.
I would say you're spot on, dude. You're spot the fuck on, because it's a buffer. It's a buffer for EH and pH, because it's the same thing. You're dealing with millivolts or nanovolts of positive and negative, ionics or individual particulate particles. And then you get into that shared, like the shared electrons, the carbon chains, and now you're getting all kinds of wonderful buffering benefits from it. And not only can it create those chains, but those chains are there kind of like a bank account. So anytime they need them, they can start pulling them apart again. And they form by default. Like it's the most beautiful system, the harmony of vibration and energy ever, because they're created and destroyed equally simultaneously. So why wouldn't it help would be my question, right?
Well, my first thought was I'm going to go place a bunch of lightning rods out in my garden. That was just the first thought. I don't know. I mean, copper poisoning, or I don't know.
No, copper's a really important mineral for element for plants. That's another one that's often deficient in soils. Yeah, you need a little bit of zinc and you need a little bit of copper. You need your molybdenum. You know, there's all of these trace elements that people don't understand. You only need a little bit. Don't be a fucking moron. But if you don't have it, then add a little bit so that it has the potential to reach its full genetic potential. So I think the key to it is not pounding a grounding rod into the soil. Like, yeah, you need to ground it. So pound a grounding rod into the soil. But more importantly, you want to create a Tesla coil above the surface. So that would be wrapping a stick and trying to wrap it at equal distances, not getting all sloppy and ugly, but try to wrap it at equal distances all the way up and then out the ends, just like a regular antenna. And if you do that, especially if you wrap it over wood, because remember, wood is a good insulator, then yeah, you got to be pulling electrons and protons out of the static energy that exists all the way around us. You know, this gets into vibration, dude. That's another one that I look forward to doing. You know, kymatics. You ever heard of that one?
I've been kind of looking into some of it where they like visualize sound, basically.
No, it's like getting water to dance, getting sand particles to create these fucking incredible sacred geometry. I mean, that is fucking beautiful. To think that it's just the fucking hertz that you're playing with.
Well, there was a reel I had seen, and I'll try to find it and send it to you. But there was a scientist that did that, where, like you're describing the kymatics, but it was color based, and the sounds were represented in color. And then he did like a 3D mapping of that, and then he took several different notes, I think it was, but there was an overlay of all these different pictures, and when he laid them over, it was a beautiful portrait of a face.
I did see that. I did see that. Like, it was three screens, 3 fucking individual screens that looked like nothing, and then you put them over it, and it's like a 3D picture, like so depth.
That's what came out of him trying to visualize the sound. Basically, like create a way to have the sound be visualized, and it was like, what a trip, man. Dude, like that to me was kind of mind-blowing, that everything is based on a vibration. In the beginning, God spoke.
Energy, frequency, vibration. Nikola Tesla.
Bam. All right, listen, we're at hour 38. We got 9 questions. Ken, what do you say we plow through the questions and we can chop it up about kymatics if there's time left?
Sure, sounds good. We'll start with Indica. Can you add biochar to hydrophilic soil?
So I'm assuming he's trying to, I think he's trying to say hydrophobic. Would biochar help with hydrophobic soil?
Okay.
That's my guess. I mean, hydrophilic means it's oversaturated. Would the biochar soak up extra moisture? Probably not enough to make a difference. Biochar is not known to be a sponge. It's known to be a very hard substance of pure carbon that can store energy for biology to break down. So I would say if it was a hydrophobic and you added biochar, again, it would probably not be beneficial.
My understanding, biochar is hydrophobic too. So,
well, it's glass, dude. It's fucking glass.
Well, it'll float. It'll float when you if you had a bucket full of biochar and poured water in it, it'll float for a while. So I'm pretty sure that wouldn't be the answer.
Okay, so the next one from Jeff is, I put a 3-inch layer of biochar at the bottom of my wicker beds to filter the water. So this is back when we were talking about the horizontal.
Yeah, that would be, in my mind, kind of dangerous because you're inviting a lot of bacteria to come in there and mine the biochar which would probably have pH issues and or potentially go anaerobic. So again, the reason we use sand is because sand is a quartz or calcium based, not a carbon glass type substance. And again, like biochar is so complex because most people don't understand good biochar has gone through gasification. It's gone through a metamorphic process. It's not fucking charcoal. It's not activated carbon. Those are different. If you want to filter your water, use activated carbon because that will pull things out of the water. Whereas biochar, if it was done correctly, is not going to pull anything out of the water. It's just providing aeration and a place for microbes to mine pure carbon.
Okay.
Smiley, you got anything on that one?
No, I agree. I don't think that's a good idea either. It's not doing what you think it's doing, basically.
Now, we were talking about clay earlier, and someone mentioned unscented gray clay kitty litter, or clay kitty litter, I should say.
Again, that's been processed. It's not elemental clay. That's why I use that word elemental, is because you want it in its organic, natural state. I mean, that kitty litter is made to absorb odors and absorb liquids. Clay by itself will absorb water, but not a lot. Very, very little bit. And it's very slow to come back out of it. So I would say, no, don't use kitty litter.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get what you're wanting, the minerals in the clay to come out.
No, and I doubt that kitty litter has any increase or any CEC value. Although you never know, it might. It very well might have. Maybe that's its odor absorbing properties, that it's attaching that ammonia before it can go volatile and releases a gas, and as a smell. It may have some CEC, but again, it's a manufactured process, and who do you trust? They're making money. They're trying to make money here, so I don't think they're have your soil interests at heart.
Yeah. Smiley, what was the name of the clay company Smiley just mentioned, or do they have online test results?
I think that was the rock dust, right?
Rock Dust Local,
Okay.
yeah.
And we brought that company up. So,
and I think you said they did have some test data on that site, right, Smiley?
Yeah, it's been a little bit since I've been on there, but last time, yeah, they had all the data on there that you wanted. So.
Okay, cool. Well, you guys can research. So we got Peter's asking, do you feed humic fulvic acid all the way through to the end of the cycle?
That's you, Smiley.
I do not. Yeah, I don't use it in flower after like day 21. So I don't really. I forget why, but I believe there was a talk Dr. Faust did, and that was his suggestion to stop using it at a certain point in flower, because what they found on test results was continued use through flower resulted in less terpenes and less cannabinoids or something like that. So there was a point he suggested stop, and I've just always done it at day 21 or whatever.
So that's day 21 in flower, right?
Yeah.
Just to make sure that everybody understands, and I think there were also some issues with foliar as well. That was what they'd found, was that when used foliarly, that it did knock back the terpenes to some degree. I don't remember if they said soil drench, but I'm pretty sure it was foliarly. But do you remember, Smiley, whether he was talking one or the other?
Yeah, I think it was the foliar, but there was another talk I remember Dr. Faust talking about him, that the humic acid can build up in the soil, or remains in the soil for a lot longer than what we think. So if you're adding it on a regular basis, it could actually build up to where you may cause a problem. But I don't know. I've talked about that with a few different people, and like a lot of people are like, I water it in all the time, and I have no problem. But I could have swore I remember Dr. Faust talking about that, where you needed to pay attention to where you weren't adding it too frequent to have a buildup to where you could have a problem. But,
Well, that would make sense. I mean, anything, I don't care how organic it is, in excess, it's going to cause adverse reactions to something.
yeah.
So, and again, like he has to say this stuff because a lot of people out there will be like, oh, if a little is good, more is way better, right? And I'm sure he's gotten those kinds of calls where, yo, you killed my plant with your product. Well, no, I didn't kill it because I didn't apply it.
Don't be a moron.
There you go.
Balance, young grasshopper.
So anyway, I've never really used them a ton other than like something, okay, I added at the beginning and then I just figure I got it in there. And I don't really look at it like it's a weekly maintenance to be adding at any means. So on a foliar level, I'm a little more liberal with it. I'll spray it. I think foliar, you can apply the fulvic acid all the time and it wouldn't hurt it any bit. So.
Have you ever applied humic acid foliar?
I haven't, just because there too, it was Dr. Faust's recommendation, but the fulvic's a lighter portion of the it's a lighter separation of the main compound, the crude humate, and then the the humic is the heavier fraction of that.
Yep. So fulvic is, I think, the lightest atomic weight of anything that we have been able to evaluate. And by that, because it's so light, it can easily penetrate the cell and go inside the cell wall and help the individual bacteria or advanced biology. So that's why, and the reason I asked about humic foliarly is because I'm under the same impression you are, that that's way better used in a soil drench. Whereas if you put the fulvic in to the soil drench, the chances of some of that migrating past your sweet spot is increased. Whereas if you foliarly the fulvic acid, any excess is going to roll down and get into the root ball, but not past the root ball. So that's kind of always been my rule of thumb on how best to use humics versus fulvics. You got anything to add on that one, Smiley, in your experience or gut feeling?
That's how I use them. I'll apply the humics to the soil, not very frequently, and I'll be a little more liberal with the fulvic foliarly.
And another thing that people don't understand is there's a tremendous amount of humic and fulvic acids bound up in organic matter. So if you've got compost, especially like a palm, so particulate organic matter, so that's like digested to some level, then those compounds are very easily broken off from that organic matter just through watering and biogeochemical reactions. So you have it anyway if you're using good compost.
Yeah. Yep. And you can make your own humic and fulvic acid from your compost or from your worm castings. So
the only way to make fulvic acid from those pure fulvic is to press. Correct. No heat. Press. Just pressure. Yeah. And good screens. Really good screens, like 47 micron stainless steel screen. Otherwise, you're going to get contaminant. You're going to get humic as well as the fulvic.
Well, it's just like when we're dry sifting our cannabis, we want just those pure terpenes. You want to have it at the right micron level to get just that.
Yep.
So we're talking about Elaine had the lab that she had set up. American One wanted to mention how much microbe life dies in the male, almost all of it, for when you're transporting it.
So Elaine, in the last 4 or 5 years, when she really rolled out the new soil food web consulting school, and I mean like the lab tech part of it. So she rolled out the new soil food web school, but then there was another class at the end of it called the consulting class, where it's pretty fucking extensive. It's pretty rigid. As a part of rolling that out and understanding how samples need to be sent, and not everybody can afford to red label it. And is red labeling helping because it's going way up in the atmosphere and way back down? So she started doing some side-by-side testing to verify quantitative, not qualitative, quantitative tests to verify what happens to biology over, say, a 5-day period. And what she found was whether she shipped it red label or whether she drove it 5 days or sent it 5 days, and compared the examples side by side with fresh, that there was a very little variation in both diversity as well as overall number counts. So it was almost negligible. Is there some loss? Yeah, but it's not enough to skew your data. But now sending it for 10 days, there's definitely a bell curve to that scenario. But what I'm under the impression is, 7 days you're okay. 5 to 7 days, that window you're going to be fine. 10 probably okay unless it's gone through extreme heat or extreme cold. Cold will probably wouldn't affect it. Extreme heat absolutely will affect biology and diversity.
So in Canada, we shouldn't be shipping soil tests in the winter because it's going to just get there frozen anyway. So,
No, actually, the freezing doesn't matter. Like, I did extensive work on this when I was at Rodale because I was trying to figure out how best to deliver this incredibly great product that I just made, right? So I tried pH suspensions. I tried making ice cubes. And the ice cubes actually worked really, really fucking well, as way better than pH suspension. So freezing's not a problem. Heat is a big problem.
Okay, I'll have to remember that being up in the northern Canada here. Freezing's good. Okay.
Yeah, freezing is good. It'll come back.
What your thoughts on Asian jumping worms?
Well, first of all, please do understand that after the last ice age, Northern America had no worms. So they all got brought in here by discoverers, adventurers, trade, and they did change the ecosystem for sure in what I believe is a positive way, although in the beginning it might not have been very positive. Remember, everything is in flux. All ecosystems are constantly evolving and changing, growing, dying back. It's all.
Leighton, I think he's asking a way to get rid of them.
So and so the Asian jumping worm came in as an ideal fishing worm because they act like snakes. So they catch the fish's attention. They came into Georgia, they spread quickly up the East Coast and out to the West Coast as a fishing bait. What happens when the fisherman's done and he's got worms left over? Dumps them in the ground, right? What they do is they actually take the ovarizing and they turn it into Rice Krispies, decimate the fungal. The saprophytes are gone. Truffles are gone. Changes the soil's ability to pull in moisture because they've changed the texture of the surface. So basically it washes away instead of holding together. I personally saw incredible damage done in the forests in the northeast corner of Connecticut, to the point where you go out there and it was just 6 inches of Rice Krispies. Rice Krispies, little tiny pellets. So Craig and I were talking about this the other day. It's like, well, that's kind of like a reset then. And those pellets are obviously got some nutrient tied up in them. And I'm like, well, yeah, you do have a point. And if you understand geological time, then it's no big deal. For us humans, we live 80 years, so we freak out about everything because we're only here for a short period of time. But in the big picture, we're not even a pimple on the ass of a goddamn elephant. as far as the geological time is concerned.
It's a nice way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does it matter? You know, everything is going to change anyway. Yeah. So we induced an invasive species. Well, yeah, the climate's changing too. So you're not going to stop climate from changing. And I hate the fact that they stole that word too now. Oh, climate change. Fuck you. It's been changing ever since the fucking dawn of time. How many mass extinctions have this planet gone through that we know of? 5 total extinctions. Yet here we are. So shut the fuck up about climate change. And I'm sorry, but don't worry about those friggin' Asian snake worms. They change in the ecology. Fuck yeah. But you're just a fucking a blink in time. And what could beneficially come out of that reset? Maybe something really, really important that nature needs more than those hyphals or those fungal gnats at this point in time. Don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't mean to get too crazy on that one.
Oh, no worries. No worries. So Gypsy, I have been hearing from masters, composters, that green turn into brown when dries. I believe that this is inaccurate. Can anyone clarify?
Yeah, that's very easy. Yeah, greens turn into browns. But I know browns that should be classified as greens, and I know greens that should be classified as browns. So it's a rule of thumb. But in order to really understand what that is that you have to look at the C to N ratio of any plant you're using. Because even some brown plants have a very high C to N ratio. Some of them have a very low C to N ratio. So it's a rule of thumb. It's like let me show you how to tie a shoe, not some crazy ass ship knot. Because once you learn how to tie your shoe, maybe then you can start tying these other fancy knots. Right. So it as a rule of thumb, browns are brown, greens are greens. When greens dry out, yes, they become browns because the nitrogen is gone. It's been volatilized into the atmosphere. And again, that C to N ratio means whether the pile is going to go hot or maybe it's never going to go hot. And cold composting works. It just takes a lot fucking longer.
Well, that's your hugelkultur out in the backyard.
You got it.
Yeah. Okay. Peter wants to ask, feed the worms avocados and they gotta have a gangbang and replicate like crazy. It's like an aphrodisiac to them, but it's not just avocados. There's a lot of different things you can use at the same time. But does the avocado have something that interacts with the worms, Leighton, or do we know?
Yeah, it's a high fat. It's got wonderful oils and fats. So I think that's why avocado tech became so popular, was because it did act like an aphrodisiac. But like you said, you can use pumpkins, you can use squash, you can use any number of things, scoop all the stuff out and make your own friggin' magic paste. And a lot of guys I've heard using rock dust and mineral powders, mineral flours to blend in with that. And then the worms just work that shit down into the soil like little friggin' taxi cabs. So yeah, there's a lot more to shell tech than just avocados.
Yeah. Smiley, you have anything to add on that?
I was just gonna say avocado is a superfood, so it's got the omega fat acids in it or whatever the
omega 3s.
Yeah, the omega 3s, and then it's got the range of nutrient in it too. So it's actually a great fertilizer in itself. Like,
cool.
Yep.
So we were talking about the energy and bringing energy in. Someone was mentioning, or Ryan was mentioning, crystals.
Hey, have you ever played with those, Smiley?
Oh yeah, I got crystals in the soil.
I knew it. I fucking knew it. Dragonfly rants and raves about crystals in soil.
Yeah.
The Invisible Garden, Andy Lopez, rants and raves about crystals. He used to grind up crystals, semi-precious gems or gems that weren't worth much because of an inclusion or a freaking carbon spot. He grind those things up and put them in elixirs to heal people. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there is energy in crystals. And again, you're getting into those outer realms of the
Woo! Woo!
it's not woo, it's just we don't have the ability.
Understanding.
Yeah. But look at the fucking watches. Quartz watch. Quartz.
Yep.
There's a reason, right? So I mean, our past ancestors knew way more than we are allowed to know on these types of things.
Yeah. So the last question is from Rusty Nails, and he says, "What about calcium bentonite clay?"
Sure. But again, bentonite clay is primary. So yeah, it has some calcium in it, but it doesn't have all the other minerals. My suggestion, if you want to use it, mix it with other elementary forms of clay. Diversity, diversity, diversity.
Yeah. That's where you need all the different types of rock dust you can get your hands on, and the micronutrients and the trace minerals to give the full genetic potential to the plant to have all the building blocks.
Exactly. Well, 2 hours, 1 minute, no more questions. Smiley, dude, so good to see you, brother. I wish I was able to come out and see you this summer, but it's just been nuts out here. Hopefully next year I'll be able to travel back, but we'll see how things go. But I'm just happy to see you again and be able to chop it up with you, my friend. You're one of the best rabbit hole guys I know.
I was real honored being invited on, man. It's always awesome to talk with you too. So I appreciate both of you and Ken.
We appreciate you. And hey, if I can return the favor, you want to bring me on one of your podcasts and get into the head again, I'm more than happy to do it anytime you'd like.
All right, I appreciate that.
Okay, well, guys, for the channel, we have Andy Lopez on Wednesday with Leah Oram, and she's the lady that we had on with Leighton and Ab talking about the humic and fulvic acid. We also have Brandon Rust on with the sun and the moon, Luna Whitcomb, and the Queen of the Sun grown Alex. And tonight we actually have a gentleman on psilocybin mushrooms who is, what the heck is the name of the conference? It's Spirit Plant Medicine Conference in Vancouver. So we're going to be talking about mushrooms tonight. Other than that, we have Michael DeLeggy on with Leighton next Monday. Av's on holidays, guys. So he'll be back in the middle of September. But that's the lineup for this week, guys. Appreciate everybody coming. Do you guys have anything you're doing that you want to mention before we go?
Smiley?
You can check out smileysangels.net. Check out our seeds.
Good man.
Okay.
And I'm just in work, eat, sleep mode right now, so bear with me.
You're always in work, eat, sleep mode, and walk Poe. Don't forget walk Poe.
I will. He's been neglected all day today, so he will get his walk.
Okay, guys. Everyone in chat, peace out. We love you all, and we'll see you later tonight, hopefully.